This video is for videographers who want to get into filming weddings. I'm going to share how I typically film a wedding ceremony with a 3-camera setup. I'll cover where I set up my tripods, what focal lengths I'm using, how I move around to make sure that every part of the ceremony is covered, and also how I capture audio. If you're interested in a specific area, just check out the chapter markers below to jump to that particular topic. If you find this video helpful, please let me know by clicking the like button and also show your support for the channel by subscribing. Let's get started with the gear that I'm using. I have 2 standard tripods and 1 monopod with a mini tripod base. This allows me to have 2 cameras that can be completely unattended with a third that is mobile, but has the option to be left unattended as long as there's stable ground and low wind for outside weddings. For lenses, I'm using 3 different focal lengths for my cameras. All the numbers I'll give you here will be for full frame sensor cameras, so if you use a camera with a crop sensor, just divide the number that I give by the appropriate crop factor and that'll give you what the equivalent focal length is for your camera. My main camera I usually have around 35 millimeters. This obviously depends on the distance to the back row, but my goal with this camera is to be a wide shot to capture the whole bridal party. If I'm using a zoom lens, it does give me the ability to adjust after the processional if I need to. My second camera is for the close-up shot. I like using this 70 to 200 millimeter lens for a somewhat telephoto view, but an even tighter zoom lens would be okay here as well. My third camera is on the monopod with this versatile 24 to 105 millimeter lens. This all-purpose lens has a very wide zoom range so that I can get a variety of shots without having to change the lenses. The most important aspect of this lens is that it has a constant aperture. Having a constant aperture means that your lens won't get brighter or darker as you zoom in like it would with a variable aperture lens like an f3.5 to 5.6. Now every venue will be different and some churches have special rules regarding camera placement and moving around during the ceremony, so be sure to check with the venue beforehand to see if there's any rules you need to be aware of. Assuming there's no limitations, I'm going to share exactly what I typically do and why I do it. For my wide camera, I place it as close to the aisle as I can on the bride's side. This is typically on the left. I have it sitting on my tallest tripod as high as it will go. Hopefully it'll be able to see over the guests' heads when they stand for the bride's entrance. I want the aperture to be set somewhat small, so between f4 and f8 depending on lighting, to keep a very wide depth of field. Also, when setting up this camera, make sure it is focused on the front area and turn autofocus off. This camera will be stationary for the duration of the wedding, unless you need to make any minor adjustments after the processional. So you want this camera to be able to run by itself for the duration of the ceremony. If you have an older camera with a record limit, check out this other video on how to overcome this limitation for your unmanned cameras. The telephoto camera, I usually start out right next to the wide camera. This lets me get both cameras going at the same time before the wedding starts. And I think it just looks better to have your gear take up as little space as possible as the guests arrive. If you can, before the ceremony starts, have someone stand up in the front where the groom will be standing for the processional to set focus and then turn off autofocus. This camera will also be left alone during the processional if you're filming alone, so you don't want it focusing on the wrong face and then missing the groom's reaction when he sees his bride for the first time. If you do have an assistant, have them man the telephoto camera. Lastly, my third camera is the one that I control during the first part of the ceremony. To start out, I prefer to stand either to the side, just out of my wide camera's view, or down in the front, just to the side of the aisle, on the same side as my cameras in the back, so that I'm not as visible in the wide shot. If it's an outdoor wedding and I have lots of room to move around, I may start out behind where the bridal party will be standing, but still on the same side of the aisle as my cameras in the back to maintain the 180-degree rule of film. For this particular ceremony, I was shooting into the sun and had to find a place in the shade to keep my image from being washed out by the sun. If you do start out behind where the bridal party will be standing, don't forget to move up near the mother of the bride before the bridal party starts walking down. Another thing I want to point out is that since I will be cutting this video with the other angles to be one continuous film from start to end of the ceremony, I want as much steady footage as possible of each group as they process down the aisle. This means that while I am watching the screen to maintain focus and adjust zoom, I'm also trying to be aware of when the next group walks down. Then, when it's time to switch to the next group, instead of a slow pan, it's a quick snap to grab the shot as quickly as possible. In post, all I have to do is switch to the wide shot during that snap transition. While I'm hoping my telephoto lens in the back has a close-up shot of the groom, sometimes I'll quickly turn and get a 2-second clip with a monopod camera just to be safe. Then turn back to get the rest of the bride walking down the aisle. As soon as the bride reaches the front of the aisle, it's my cue to exit stage right. From there, I'll set up the monopod on the side to get a good view of the father giving away the bride. Now, if I like the shot from the side, I'll usually leave the monopod in place while I go around to check the cameras at the back, adjusting the wide camera if needed and moving the telephoto camera to the left to have a better view of the officiant and groom. After I'm happy with the setup in the back, I'll go back up to relocate the monopod around to the right side of the audience to have a view of the bride's face for the vows later on. Obviously, it's best to ask the couple beforehand if they have any other elements in their ceremony, like a unity cross or candle lighting, so that you won't be caught off guard, or if there will be a lengthy homily, you may have some extra time to get a few creative shots from the back. The important thing is for you not to be a distraction to anyone. You're simply there to capture the ceremony and should try to be as discreet as possible. Depending on how quickly the ceremony is going, after the vows, I may transition my camera over to my pre-balanced gimbal. Or if I don't think I'll have enough time, I'll just leave it on the monopod for the first kiss and exit. This is typically the only part where I'll switch my mobile camera from 24 FPS to 60 FPS to have the option for slow motion in the highlight film. After capturing the first kiss and the couple's exit, I find a good location near the wide camera to film the recessional. Usually the bridesmaids and groomsmen are exiting fairly quickly, so you won't have a lot of time to pan back and forth between them as they exit. What I found works best is to pick a focal length around 35 to 50 millimeters and follow the first pair back, then just before they exit the frame, tap to focus on the next pair while keeping the framing constant. Keep this up until after the grandparents exit. After the officiant gives any final instructions or a final prayer, it's time to stop recording and put everything away. So that's how I handle the video portion of the ceremony. Now for the audio portion, assuming there's a sound system present, I have my trusty Zoom F3 with XLR input. The F3 with 32-bit float is the easiest way to capture soundboard audio. Its simple design lets me plug into an XLR out, check with headphones to make sure I have a clean source, and hit record, then walk away, knowing that my audio won't peak even if the output level from the board changes. Even if the officiant and groom are mic'd by the sound guy, I'm still going to put my own recorder on them because backups are always a good idea. I currently use the Rode Wireless Pro transmitting to my telephoto camera. But if you don't have a wireless system that also records to itself, a recorder like the Zoom F2 or the Tascam DR10L Pro are also great options. Having that 32-bit float backup recording is great for just in case. Also, I carry a spare set of both black and white lavs as a backup and to be able to match whatever the officiant and groom are wearing. If I'm filming the whole day, I'll usually also mic the bride using this Neopax thigh strap to secure the recording module and some Rycote stickies to secure the mic. I had one outdoor wedding ceremony that miking the bride saved me because her mic was the only one that didn't pick up constant wind noise. If it's an indoor ceremony, I usually only mic the bride if they're reading letters to each other prior to the ceremony so that I don't have a visible lav. So I mentioned that I have the Wireless Pro transmitting to the telephoto camera. Since I'm planning on sliding it over to the left in the middle of the ceremony, if I had a shotgun mic on it, the sound would change significantly when it's moved. So that leaves my wide stationary camera for the Rode VideoMic Pro for the safety house audio track. For the camera on the monopod, It's just recording with the built-in mics because that's just for syncing up the video in post. So that wraps up my brief overview of how I capture wedding ceremonies. After I get back to the office and import all the footage, it's a fairly simple workflow to create a multicam clip in Final Cut Pro and have it sync up all the video and audio angles, then cut and mix the multicam for the best angles and audio.